The following presentation was recorded live for the 18th Annual Convention of CALLERLAB. We take you live to the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, where our session is just getting underway.
Morning. We'd like to welcome you to what has become this year's music session. Our purpose here this morning is to exchange information. It's to exchange facts. We're going to attempt to make sure that each of you has all of the information, all of the facts, and that you understand them about what's going on with this licensing situation. I'm getting help from the remedial bunch in the front. I'd ask you to try very hard. Clear your minds of the bits and pieces that you've picked up from the hallway experts. Excuse me. Let go of the would-be legal evaluations that you've been offered to you from the barbers and the bartenders in the world. Open your minds and listen to all of the facts, and then you decide. You make up your minds of what's happened, what we've done, and how we've done it, why we've done it. We're going to make sure you know. After you've heard that all we have to share, and after we've answered all your questions, I think you're going to find out that your executive committee, with the help and concurrence of your elected board, has taken your organization to the front line, to the very front of the line in the arena of professional leadership in the square dance world. I really believe that. We on the executive committee, while working on the cutting edge of this wholly new arena, this whole new idea of what we're going to try to do for not only our membership, which is what we're charged to do and elected to do, but also what we can do on behalf of the square dance world, how we can extend our umbrella to do as a service to the square dance activity, may have made some mistakes under the pressure and the time constraints that have been offered to us by outside sources. We feel that if we've made any mistakes, it might have been in the area of disseminating information fully and accurately enough. I can assure you there was no design in this. We're making it right as quickly and as fully as we can. We want you to know everything that's going on. You have a right to know and understand what we've done. You put us in a position to work for you, and we've been doing that for a lot more hours than you might even imagine. If you think you've had phone calls, you think you've dealt with anger, frustration, misinformation, rumors, contradictions, let me tell you what it's been at our homes, at our dances, on our CBs, in the restrooms of the world. It's really been amazing. As you will, I hope, come to understand, we really have taken the high road in this. We've taken the ethical, the moral, the right road in the way to handle this situation. Now, you've seen in the front, we have an easel up here, a blackboard, if you will, a whiteboard. It breaks it all down. We're going to leave it up here, even after the session, so you can come up, you can write it down. This is what the contract says. It's there for you. First off, I'm going to have John Kay come in and talk with you. He's going to take you step by step from the beginning. We want you to know everything that happened from the time BMI descended on the world with his own version of a Scud attack and how we've tried to respond. We kept putting in orders for Patriot missiles and nothing ever showed up. After John has taken you all the way up to the current time, George White's going to talk to you briefly, but he's going to talk to you about what the differences are between a mechanical license and the performance license, and what it is that we have negotiated being a very new thing. All right, this is new. This is not something that BMI has done before. And we've brought them to the table to have them give us an opportunity to extend an umbrella of protection to the square dance world. And George will talk to you a little bit about copyright law and a little bit about public domain, so you have a sense of where we're coming from on this. I want to remind you that your executive committee did not sit there and make legal decisions, totally evaluate legal documents, because we are not professionals to do that. We hired attorneys to do that and to advise us, as we should have done, to protect you fully, protect all of us, and to help the square dance world. Following that, we're going to have a session on questions and answers. We're going to ask a couple of things of you. If your question has been asked and addressed, don't keep asking the same question over and over again. We're also going to ask you, if you step forward, to say, we've heard a rumor about, what about, do you know anything about this, that, and the other? Identify for us the source that you have your information from. When we have a source from you, so we know that we can trace it back to find out if it's something we know nothing about, we'll be glad to respond as best we can. But just idle rumor, or I heard this and I heard that, isn't going to do anything for us. What we've given you first and foremost up front are all the facts, all of them. Right? And we can explain to you along the way every step we've taken. We want you to know why. If you'll do that, we'll give everybody an opportunity that we possibly can in the time allotted. We're not going to burn up all the time standing up here talking and take away your question and answer time. That's what you're here for. Let's start with John.
Thank you, John. Could I ask all of you to stand for just a moment, please? Not for silent prayer. Now, would everybody please slide to your center aisle so you have no vacant spots and anybody who's still standing can take the seats on the edge. Please do that. We ask that there be no center seats left vacant. Please slide in so that you don't have any empty seats in the middle of the rows.
Don't attack them. We got a good story.
I do, but that's not attack.
No. Yeah. I'm thinking more of your body voice, as Martin would say.
Oh, okay. Okay. We appreciate your cooperation on that. There are seats over here on this side. This whole thing started not because CALLERLAB was interested in figuring out a way to create new members, but rather in response to literally hundreds of phone calls. I got this letter from BMI. What am I going to do? And there were many, many times that I wanted to change the CALLERLAB phone to BMI hotline. We discussed this among the executive committee, and we said, we've got to do something. We've got to meet with those people and come up with a solution, or we are going to see the termination of square dancing as we know it. How many of you in this room got copies of that letter in October from BMI? Okay. Then obviously you probably are well among those who got a little bit of trepidation and a pucker factor when you saw how much they wanted for each dance, each workshop, each class. It doesn't take a mental genius to determine that if a club did one class a week, one workshop a week, and 2 club dances a month, which is not an uncommon situation, to see that it would cost a typical club something in excess of $2,000 a year. Now, I don't know what your clubs are like, but I don't know of too many clubs in the Northeast who have an extra $2,000 who could afford that sort of licensing arrangement. The executive committee said, we've got to come up with a better, less expensive way to meet the legal requirements of the copyright laws. We contacted CALLERLAB, and we went to New York City, to the BMI headquarters office on West 57th Street, and we sat down with the idea that we would try to explain to them a little bit about the square dancing activity, the folk nature of the activity, the limited numbers, the limited revenues which came in, and told them that if they insisted in their method of licensing the sponsors of the organizations, they would drive everyone out of business. Their first reaction was, we don't want to do that. And we agreed, we don't want to do that. The net result was that we came up with a system whereby we could license the performer instead of the sponsor. It is very true that it is the sponsor of the activity who is responsible. In some instances where you have a caller-run club, where you have a caller-run workshop, the caller indeed is the sponsor of the activity. Each of you who is running your own activity, if you had not to exceed 60 dancers per week, would be liable for the $15 BMI license fee and some similar amount, maybe 7.5 or more, from ASCAP. It doesn't take too many workshops at that rate to more than cover the cost of the license that we were able to negotiate for the combined fees of both BMI and ASCAP. When we first started the negotiations, we took the approach that we wanted to address the bulk of the club problems. And to this end, the language read classes, workshops, and regular club dances. And the fee structure, which appears on the board over here, was what was initially agreed to as being the fee for the first 2 years of the contract life. You'll notice that it is for the apprentices a total fee of $52.50, which consists of $20 for the BMI portion, $17.50 for the Ascap portion, and a $15 administrative fee. For those members and subscribers, and anyone calling up to 150 dances a year, the fee is $30, and again the $15 administrative fee. For those people who call between 151 and 300 dances a year, ASCAP portion and BMI portion are both $45, $15 administrative fee. And ASCAP wanted to put in the fee of over 300 dances of $80. Thus, the totals that you see there appear to be $52.50, $75, $105, and $140. A member or subscriber in CALLERLAB must be calling a minimum of 50 dances a year. That's the once a week to be considered an active caller. So all the minimum fee for members and subscribers was the $60 due. You have a question? If you can hold it. Okay. You're just waving to somebody? Fine. Wave back at him, will you? $60 dues, $15 for the liability insurance for U.S. callers, and the appropriate license fee based upon the frequency of dance. Since we first agreed to the fees, your executive committee started to work about the specific language which was contained within it, and also the other situations. When we first met with them, they were taking the approach that perhaps weekends and festivals would appear to be under a different agreement. While we didn't accept that outright, we recognized that to them, the term festival started in their mindset big bucks, because festival, by their definition, is 20,000 or more dancers, and we don't think of a festival necessarily as having 20,000 dancers. John says his last club dance. Right. You believe that? I've got some soggy land down in Florida I'd love to sell. The important thing is we negotiated with them, and we changed some of the understanding they have had so that all weekends are indeed covered as long as you use licensed callers and cuers. We also have covered one-night stands. They wanted to exclude malls, shopping centers, demonstrations. They wanted to exclude live music. And we said, look, live music is not the predominant way in which our calling is being handled today. Therefore, there are very few who use live music on a regular basis. But there are some who also use recorded music. The agreement that we now have with BMI and ASCAP is that all events exclusive of state and national conventions are covered by the use of a licensed caller and cuer. We feel that this is a major, major step forward. We feel that your executive committee has negotiated a fair and equitable contract. The feedback that we are getting from clubs, from organizations, from federations, is that you guys did a great job. You have protected us from exorbitant licensing fees. When you think of the cost to an individual caller, $75 for up to 150 dances, and assume for sake of discussion that you're calling 150 dances. That's 50 cents a dance. Even if the caller were not previously a member of CALLERLAB, their total dues and fees would be $150, $1 a dance. Now, is there anybody in this whole room who hasn't at least wasted $1 worth of gas by the way you drive at something over 55? I don't think any of us can say that. I'm guilty of that. and I suspect most of you are too. This also is a legitimate write-off on your Schedule C for tax purposes. It is a cost of doing business. It is a very minute portion. Look at it as cheap insurance. Look at it as being able to sleep at night, knowing that we are complying with the law and that we have a very reasonable contract. We also got malls covered when they are used for purposes of recruitment, so that is covered. One-night stands, party nights, those are covered. Church groups, demos, shut-ins, handicapped, physical or mentally handicapped people, all of those are covered by a licensed caller. Let me urge you that when you discuss this with a club or anyone, use the term licensed caller. People who choose not to be a member of CALLERLAB may get a license on their own. It will cost more, but they are able to negotiate with BMI and ASCAP directly to get a license. The license contract which we have signed, or are going to sign, I should say, is based upon a minimum of 500 callers. And if an organization doesn't have at least 500 callers, these fees will not apply. So that's where we got, that's how we got there, that's what we negotiated. Bottom line for your purposes, everything is covered except state and national conventions.
Want to be introduced? Want to be introduced?
I want to talk about the background behind all of this as far as copyright law is concerned, just so you have an understanding of where this came from, how long we've lived with this, and what it really means to us. Yeah, this is going to deal with federal law. Consider BMI and ASCAP themselves as nothing more than a membership association just like CALLERLAB. We provide a service to our members. BMI and ASCAP provide a service to their members. Their service is to collect royalties for the members of BMI and ASCAP. I've heard many callers referring to BMI laws and ASCAP laws. There are no such thing. What we're dealing here with is federal law. In 1906, Congress adopted laws to protect an author and give him the exclusive right to publish and sell copies of his intellectual achievements. These were dramatic works, literary works, musical works, artistic works, and so forth. This law gave an author, let's say of music, a right for 28 years. During that initial 28 years, he could collect royalties on his work. In the 28th year of that copyright, he could extend or renew that copyright for an additional 28 years. That means a total of 56 years. When you hear someone say this music is in the public domain, it must have been written prior to 1935 because that's 56 years ago. So if you see a copyright on a piece of sheet music that says copyrighted 1934, 1933, 1926, that music would be in the public domain. In 1976, Congress modified the copyright law, changing the period of protection from 28 or 56 years to the lifetime of the author plus 50 years. That law became effective on January 1st, 1978. So anything written since January 1st, 1978 is for 50 years plus the lifetime of the author, or vice versa, the lifetime of the author plus another 50 years, depending on how he goes. Whichever came first, right? A second provision of that 1976 law states that if the work was done for hire, the copyright protection would be for a period of 75 years. So if an organization commissions an author to write a song, then that doesn't deal any longer with his lifetime. That work is now owned by the person who commissioned the work, and the copyright is an automatic 75 years. There are two different kinds of copyright. There's a common law copyright and a statutory copyright. The one that we're dealing with is a statutory copyright, and the part of it that we're dealing with is for, quote, musical works, including accompanying words. That's the one that hits us most closely. Every time you play or cause to be played a record or tape containing music that is copyright, you are publicly performing the work and would be infringing on the public performance rights of the owner of the copyright, who is the composer or the publisher, unless you received permission from the composer or a license to use the work from someone like BMI or ASCAP. The same is true if you hire live musicians to perform a copyrighted work. A public performance is defined as a performance, quote, at a place open to the public or at any place where a substantial number of persons outside of a normal circle of family and its social acquaintances is gathered. The square dance would clearly fall into that definition. If you're using the music in your basement to family, friends, and acquaintances, then the license is not applicable. One other area of concern is the infringement of the reproduction and distribution rights. We've been talking about the performance rights. The reproduction and distribution rights are separate from the performance rights. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the mechanical rights to a piece of music. Often a dancer, caller, or leader will tape record a dance or parts of a dance. The recording technically infringes the reproduction rights of the composer, publisher of the work, and the reproduction rights of the record company, which owns the reproduction rights for the sound recording. If copies of that recording are further sold, rented, or even lent out to others, there is a further infringement on the distribution rights of the composer, as well as the distribution rights of the record company that produced the record. In order to be safe, if you intend to make such tapes and offer them for sale, rental, or lending, you should contact three parties. Number one, the licensing company, BMI-Ascap, or CSAC, it's another organization we haven't heard from, to secure the performance rights. Don't sweat it. CSAC typically license only classical works, but they do happen to be another organization just like BMI and ASCAP.
Some of this calling is classical, I'll tell you.
Yeah. John's comment was some of the calling is classical.
Better offer.
From them, you would secure the actual performance right. Then you would contact the composer or publisher to secure the reproduction and distribution rights. And three, you would contact the record company or companies to secure the reproduction and distribution rights for the particular sound recordings. Now, the mechanical license comes from an agency called the Fox Agency in New York City. And the people like Ernie here that presses records pays a royalty to the Fox Agency for the records that he produces, which gives him the mechanical rights to reproduce that music onto a piece of vinyl. Right. Now, there are exemptions from the copyright law, and you've heard a lot of rumors about this. Well, I don't charge anything, so I'm exempt. Whether you charge for a license or charge for the performance has nothing to do with whether or not you are exempt from copyright law. Here are the exemptions from copyright law. They clearly don't apply to square dancing as we know it. For instance, Section 110I exempts certain classroom usage. There are 6 requirements for the exemption, and the organization must meet all 6 requirements. 1, the music must itself be lawfully made, not a taped copy of a purchased record. 2, the use must be during face-to-face instruction. 3, in a non-profit educational institution. 4, used by instructors or pupils. And 5, in the course of teaching activities. 6, in a classroom. Section 110-4 goes on to exempt certain types of non-commercial usage. There are 5 requirements for this exemption. 1, it applies only to non-dramatic, literary, and musical works. We are the musical works part. 2, it excludes transmissions, that is, broadcasts of radio, TV, and so forth. 3, it must be without any purpose of commercial advantage. 4, no performer, organizer, or producer may be paid. And 5, either no admission is charged, or if charged, all net proceeds must go to educational, religious, or charitable purposes unless there is a protest in writing from the author. So that's the federal background of what's happening in this BMI, ASCAP, and copyright law. I have asked, and the record producers are meeting today, I have asked them to consider giving us a list of all music that they consider to be in the public domain. We cannot get a catalog from BMI or ASCAP that tells us what records they license, but we can send them a list of records and ask them if they license those particular records. Pardon? The reason we can't get at the catalog is, number one, the size of it is there's 2.5 million songs licensed by BMI and another 1.5 million by ASCAP. This is larger than the New York City Yellow Pages, right? And that changes every day. And authors can belong to BMI, they can belong to ASCAP, or they can belong to both, and they can switch their membership anytime they want to. They can be a member of BMI this year, ASCAP next year. So there's no way that they could publish a catalog that wouldn't be out of date by tomorrow morning. That's why we can't get the listing. But we can send them a list. And if the record producers would provide us with a list of tunes that they believe to be in the public domain, we could then send that list to BMI and ASCAP, and they would respond which of those tunes they really don't know anything about because they don't license them. Once we have that list, we could recommend that callers, for instance, a lot of callers will record a tape that dancers then take and put in a tape recorder or tape player and put it on a float in a parade. And if we could tell you callers which of those tunes are public domain, you could use only those tunes when you make those tapes for parades and demonstrations at malls and so forth. That's a project that we're just looking into. We'll have an answer for that probably later today after the record producers meet and decide whether they can go along with that. If you need or want a source of public domain music, the best thing in the world is to buy a fake book, F-A-K-E, fake book that musicians use, because every piece of sheet music listed in those fake books lists the date of the copywriter and the name of the author. And the country western fake books, for instance, list just about every piece of music that we use. So you can leaf through that book. The hard part is knowing what the real name of the tune is that you're looking for, because we typically change them. If you buy a hoedown, for instance, and the name of the hoedown is Chocolate, you won't find that in the BMI or ASCAP listing. So you have no idea whether it was something that the recording company invented by starting a drum beat and the musicians were just asked to, hey, here's your chord progression, just sit in here and play along and let's make a hoedown record. And you can't tell whether that was done that way or whether it was an actual popular copyrighted tune that they played around the melody of it and came up with a hoedown record. So just knowing the name that's on the record label doesn't necessarily mean we can trace the copyright on it. Okay? I'll let John handle the questions.
Thank you, George. Now, we're going to take questions. We're going to give everybody an opportunity. We have not gotten that plugged in yet. All right, we're having a little problem with the house system as far as getting a microphone for you to use. We will repeat the sense of every question so that everyone hears what's being answered. Yes, this is being taped. All right, it's being taped for purposes of our organization for use in case questions come up that we didn't get recorded, that we're looking for answers to, that we don't have at this time, so we can go back and get answers to the correct questions. I want you to understand something. I think it is not to our advantage to look for ways to avoid meeting this responsibility. The attorneys we've retained indicate that there is a liability out there. We've told you the liability is with whoever is involved in promoting the event. Sometimes it's callers, often it's clubs. That's a responsibility. There's a moral, ethical, legal responsibility. And to try to avoid it, not only is that wrong, and we've gotten a free ride for some time, there's another aspect. Why should we try to restrict ourselves in our artistic abilities in terms of saying, well, we won't use this kind of music, we won't use that kind of music. I don't want that restriction. As a caller, I want to be able to use all the good stuff, especially the stuff that's coming out currently. Not that there isn't stuff in public domain that's excellent and fun and worthwhile dancing to, it is, but I don't want to have to live with purely that restriction. So I look at this as an opportunity to be able to go forward and feel free to work and to try to improve myself when I work and I present to the dancers to give them the best opportunity to have a good time so we keep them in the activity.
Question line up here. We'll let you speak into the mic.
Right, we're going to ask you to come forward in a line for the questions, and we'll let you talk at the mic. That'll save time instead of our repeating every single question. Line up on our right. We'll go from there, and we'll take turns in answering as that case may be. John, I'm going to let you go ahead and start.
Grady Green from South Texas. I would like to ask CALLERLAB to help
us as callers and as leaders in our particular areas to do one main thing: to communicate with all levels, if possible, of so-called sponsors of dances, from the national level filtered down, please, through our various areas or districts or associations to our club officers and so forth, explaining and emphasizing that this is law. And again, as much as you can, what you have done. I think CALLERLAB can help us out as leaders by helping us through the main office, the national organization, to explain to the so-called sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Grady. To answer your question on that, the Board of Governors is indeed working on a press release, and that's exactly what we intend to do as soon as this convention is over. Yeah, we have a listing of some 300 publications. We were unable to keep associations updated. We do have a list from the National Square Dance Convention, the associations that they have, and they will all get copies of the press release. If you're not sure if your association and or local publication is on the list, please send a copy of that to George. We'll put it on the computer, and they will be put on our mailing list.
Rusty Wright, Santa Fe, New Mexico, USA. My question is, why are state festivals not covered?
State conventions. The reason is quite simple, Rusty. In order to determine the license fee, we have to know how many people and how much you charge. There is no way that CALLERLAB can speak for state or local federations. What we can speak for are the callers who join CALLERLAB and pay the license fees. By negotiating the way we did of the performance license, and their understanding is we will not license conventions, either state or national in basis, we have no way of knowing how many they have. United Square Dancers of America were concerned about this, and they had a lawyer who was all set to do that, and I said, fine, but let me suggest that before you go talk to BMI and ASCAP, that you know how many each state is going to have at their convention and how much they're going to charge, because if you don't know these numbers, they won't even talk to you. So we didn't try to negotiate for that last 1% of the square dance activity. Basic price for a convention. The basic price for a convention, which they agreed for both BMI and ASCAP, 4.5 cents per dancer for the event. Minimum is $150. That's include up to a 3-day event, such as a state or a national convention is frequently held. And if you are using live music, $200 a day in addition to the 4.5 cents per person. Please, if you have a question at the end.
My name is Loretta Huckabone, and I'm from San Diego, California. First of all, I'd like to say that I think you've done an excellent job negotiating a reasonable fee and solving a problem that's a real threat to the existence of square dancing. From what you said, this is a 2-year agreement. I'd like to know if you have a feel for the future, because at this point now they have all of our names, all of our addresses, and how many dances we're calling.
Okay. The answer to your question is that for BMI, the fees that you see on there go up $5 in each category for the year beginning 1st of April 1993. The ASCAP portion goes up, beg pardon? Yes? The ASCAP portion goes up by the Consumer Price Index, which may or may not be more or less than $5. I don't know. I don't think any of us in this room can predict that. We feel that is a reasonable approach. And to that end, we can agree with that. I think the fact, just as an aside, and I kind of look at this as one of the fringe benefits of playing wordsmithing over the years. They made a typo in their first contract, and thus we have a fixed fee for the first 2 years. We held their feet to the fire.
Well, there's another thing about that is really important that you understand. At the end of that time frame that we're talking about on this, what we've done here, we are going to be negotiating from a position of strength, very much strength. Understand, most of the callers are not liable. The sponsoring group is liable. If they become ridiculous in their demands, we say, fine. You may have a lot of names. You spend the money. You contact every one of them. You interface and negotiate and go through every single caller on and off the list. Or you can work with us in a reasonable fashion and let that continue. You contact all of the square dance, round dance clubs, etc., etc. We're not going to provide you with all that. You go ahead. And that's a position that we're in because we are trying to extend an umbrella here to the groups to protect square dancing. So I think we have a very strong base from which to negotiate to them 3 years down the road.
There's one other thing I should have mentioned to you in background. We've had a number of questions that, how did they get started? How did they get that mailing list for the 7,000 letters they mailed out? How many of you have asked that question? We'll tell you. Under threat of lawsuit, Gordon Goss, editor and publisher of the National Square Dance Director, was threatened by BMI, and he argued and tried in vain so that he would not have to give them a list. Under pressure of court injunctions, he gave them a 1987, or sold to them, I should say, a 1987 mailing list. And they sent out some 7,000 letters. That is a fact. Not because Gordon was trying to mess up the square dance activity, but rather he was trying to keep himself out of jail, and I think we can all support that contention. I think all of us would prefer not to go to jail. Although you'd have a captive audience if you could train them to dance.
Ozzy Oswald, Windsor, New York. I'd be more interested in what you were referring to as the mechanics, pressing records, tapes, caller tapes, note services, and things like that.
The tune is what is licensable. The tune is what is copyrighted, and the mechanical license, a record producer gets permission from the Harry Fox Agency to record a specific tune, and they pay a fee, which I think is currently about 5.7 cents per record. If they produce 500 records, they would have 5.7 cents times the 500. What that gives you as the individual who buys that record is the right to listen to it in the privacy of your own home. If that record is played other than in the privacy of your own home, that is subject to a license fee. That's what the mechanical production covers. The production of the record, period, not the performance of that record.
Tape services.
Tape's the same category. Most people, and I subject this answer to overrule, obviously, by those of you who make tapes. I suspect that many of the people who produce tapes for resale have not gotten the mechanical license permit. I suspect. But that's not our purpose. Tape services? Is that your question?
No, basically callers putting out caller notes using music on a tape.
You're talking about tape for dancing, or are you talking about a tape to listen to portions of records, which is a commercial way of selling that record?
No, particularly note services, like Al Stevens said, note services.
Note service is not a musical performance. Beg pardon?
Caller records his own music to sell his own tapes.
He records in the live music and sells them, and it's not copyrighted?
I'm asking you whether this cover that.
I'm not sure I understand the question. If I understand the question, let me see if I can rephrase your question, because you're not in the head of the line. And I'm not trying to put anybody down. I really am not. You're saying that you record music that you created on your own. Do you yield to him?
John Blessing, Denver. I've got friends of mine, and I know a lot of callers, will record a tune, Ace in the Hole, whatever. They put their choreography in. They sell tapes at dances to dancers or to other callers. Is that covered by the BMI-Ascap? Yes.
You'll find that is called piracy and subject to the laws of the land. You may step to the end of the line because you've lost your turn.
Dave Harry, Seattle, Washington. I wonder, did you, when you were addressing copyright laws and whichever, and negotiating, did you also negotiate the copyright laws involving popular releases? Are we out of the woods on that when we use popular rounds for cueing and all that?
If it is a tune which has been copyrighted by BMI and or ASCAP, and you have a license, it covers all musical works covered under copyright by those organizations, yes. Some people ask the question on if a husband and wife call and cue together, how many licenses are required? 1. If the husband calls and the wife cues at a separate location on the same night, both must be licensed.
Abe Meyer, Clearwater, Minnesota. I would like to have clarified where that leaves clubs that use videotapes in the lack of numbers. Where does that leave them as far as legality? They're using commercially produced videotapes to teach their dancers.
John says he'll be happy to handle that one.
It's a good question. That's why we're taping the session. I think we're going to have to get a ruling on that. I don't honestly know, and I don't know. George, do you know? George's suspicion is that the videotape in question may well not be copyrighted, in which case it's illegal anyway. But we're going to have to go back and ask on that one. It's a good question. George?
Let me explain one more thing about this public domain music. Once a tune goes out into the public domain, if another orchestra puts it to a specific arrangement and re-records it, it can then be re-copyrighted. I'll give you, for instance, Auld Lang Syne. Guy Lombardo took Auld Lang Syne that was in the public domain, made a specific arrangement of it, and you hear it just about every New Year's Eve on every TV station. That is still copyrighted. There are some Happy Birthday records that are re-copyrighted due to the arrangement. I don't think there's any that we as square dancers would run into. We do have those records out there with Happy Birthday on it, but they were recorded by a studio orchestra, not a specific arrangement, therefore not copyrighted. But tunes like Auld Lang Syne with a specific arranger can be put back into copyright.
Okay?
Mel Yeoman, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Can I ask 2 questions, or do I have to go to the end of the line? Well, the first is, first I wanted to know is, are there any other organizations besides BMI and ASCAP involved in it, will be involved in the situation?
What's your second question?
The second question is that I do, pertaining somewhat similar to that, I use a lot of, because I teach a lot of lines and folk dances and so forth, and some of these dances, like Israel dances and so forth, they're truly recorded in Israel somewhere else, and some Canadian records and things on that order. Would I be liable to an international situation where I might have to pay for these licensing?
First question, first answer. Other organizations that we know about could include CSAC. As George mentioned, they are mostly classical works. While many of the performances of square dance callers are indeed classic, they may not necessarily be covered by CSAC. Probably 98 to 99% of the records which we use are indeed copyrighted by either BMI or ASCAP, and this license covers all of those. The second question is, if the music has not been copyrighted by BMI or ASCAP, you are not subject to BMI or ASCAP prosecution under the federal copyright laws.
Frank Lesconier, Southern California. I started off with 1 question, now have 4. Could I have 2 and go back to the line and do my other 2? First, tapes that are already produced by a caller that did not have mechanical license, we have to get a mechanical license for it. Okay. Number 2, a caller that is going to procure a license through somewhere else, then wants to join CALLERLAB. Do they have to pay double licenses? Number 3, a weekend. He's going to answer all of them at once. Number 3, the weekend sessions or weekend festivals. If you do 5 sessions, is that counted as 5? On the number, when we're counting 1 through 50, is that 5 or is that 1 day? Number 4, what did the administration fees cover?
Okay. Number one, tapes which are produced are not grandfathered in. Number two was it? I have licensed caller. Give me a little bit more on that, Frank.
If they're a licensed caller, that they get it through somewhere.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about dual fees? We will address that. We don't have a ready answer for that at this time. The third question is weekends. Huh?
You have to be a member.
In order to get a license from us, you must be a member of CALLERLAB. But I believe, if I understand the question correctly, is if he obtained a license from somewhere else and then wishes to join CALLERLAB. We do not yet have an answer for that. We will address that problem. That's a valid concern. How many sessions, if you have a Friday night, a Saturday morning workshop, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and a Sunday morning workshop, does that count as 5 dances? I could see counting it as 1 dance Friday. I could even accept stretching perhaps 1 dance on Saturday and 1 dance on Sunday. I don't think you can count it as 1 event if it's over a 3-day period. Round the Lab says that they have in their contract that they count the number of days that they call, regardless of how many times within that day. So I can assume that a minimum of 3, but certainly a maximum of 5. And to answer on the cost of the administrative fees and what do they cover, here's John Marshall.
Sorry, I girded my loins for this question. I do want to talk about it. I was going to bring it up if nobody else asked. I really was, because there's some questions going on about that. There's even some talk about, well, we'll start our own group and there won't be administration fees. I'm going to try to figure that out. But there's been a lot of things that have been going on here. One of the first things was you have to recognize, when this came to us, we were looking at a terrific roll of the dice. Are we going to lose a tremendous number of members in this organization because we have felt that the right way to go is to comply with the federal law? We knew that was a possibility. We hoped not, but we wanted to ensure ourselves to some degree of some cushion that we wouldn't end up bankrupt. That was one part of it. We have an 800 number that's burning up the lines since this happened. It's $300 a month. All right? That's going to continue. We need that service. We need to provide that access to all of you. It costs us $300 a month. What has it saved the membership? I don't know, but a lot. Right? Legal fees. You don't think the lawyers said, sure, show it to us, no problem. Right? No problem, man. Hey, come in, sit down. Yes, yes. We'll fix you up. You want a little lawsuit? You know. Obviously, that was not the case. We're looking at minimum $3,000, I believe, for attorney's fees. I keep thinking about that for the group. It's not going to have any admin fees. If they get it started, I assume that they're going to use what you've paid for and use our contract, is what I assume. Take a free ride. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. They haven't talked to me. So we'll leave that alone. We have mailings. John, need an approximation on what a mailing to the membership costs.
A minimum mailing, if it's a single sheet in a single envelope mailed first class, is no less than 50 cents per person. Canadian, if we mail it to them, of course, would be more. Overseas, goes up even more, goes up to 49 cents per letter just in the postage. If you have multiple pages, you're talking about the added cost of folding. You're talking about the added cost of stuffing and collating and things of that nature. It is not inexpensive when you're dealing with a membership in excess of 3,000 people. That's what the administrative fees are going. Someone says, what about what our dues go for? Obviously, dues were set before BMI and ASCAP. Dues cover the normal day-to-day operations of CALLERLAB and the sponsoring of the conventions and things of that nature. We tried to be fair with this. Ernie mentioned yesterday in his opening remarks that due to the overwhelming success we have had with the number of people who have joined CALLERLAB and paid the fees, we have a rather substantial income which has been produced by the administrative fees. It is quite possible that we will indeed reduce the administrative fee next year. That is under consideration. Believe me, there is nobody on the board who is out to say, boy, we're going to get every dime we can. That's not the way we operate on the board. We do, indeed. We pay the same fees you do. We pay the same thing for the convention you do. Everybody pays for the room. Nobody's getting a kickback. That's just in case some of you have heard that rumor.
That's the nicest sound I've heard in a long time, because I've had some people openly say such to us. and didn't go down real well. What we did in terms of an administrative fee was sound business judgment. Part of what the executive committee was elected from within the board to do was handle the fiscal management of the organization. We were trying to ensure the ongoing health of the organization. If we don't need it, we won't take it. We won't ask for it. But whatever we take and get will be used for the organization and for square dancing. Please understand that, right? We'll do whatever we can to lessen the impact as much as possible. I, for one, figure $1 a day is not too big a problem. We've got to roll. We've got a lot of questions.
Herb Egener, Aurora, Colorado. No questions. Two requests. Would the record producers please discuss the feasibility of, when they determine what is in the public domain, of putting a PD on their record labels so that we that use those records will have an idea? See if that kind of thing would be feasible. Second request, tell me what kind of card, identification, license, or whatever I am going to get that I can present to the clubs when they can ask me if I'm a licensed caller.
Thank you, Herb. We've got one to show you here, I believe. No. Right. All right. John's still looking. We'll go ahead with the next question, and we'll bring that to show you. George has a quick comment. We're also, the board is designing, though, a membership card in this organization. We're going to go back to that. We feel you all should have something to carry, to identify you as a CALLERLAB member, and we're working on a design for that as of, as of the Sunday meeting. Right? Okay, here we go, John. Quick.
From BMI, you will get a decal. From ASCAP, you get a decal. I only wish that I could practice my John Jones look. From both, you will get a small card which will not have a license number on it, but will say that you are licensed for the year 1 April 91 through 31 March 92. Some people have asked the question as to why we selected that date. Was that CALLERLAB imposed? The answer is yes and no. They wanted the date of 1 January. We told them it would be physically impossible for us to have a date of 1 January since our dues year began the 1st of April. We said we sent out dues notices around the 1st of the year, and in order for us to be able to effectively administer this program, we had to have a starting date in such a way that it would be the 1st of April. We are going to give them a list and the appropriate fees which they have earned for licenses for members, subscribers, and apprentices, and others who have purchased a license up through the period of 1 April. Then we will periodically update that so that they have a record. If you joined after that date, they will have a record of when you are covered and so forth. That is the best we could do, and we felt that was a reasonable trade-off between their requests and our administrative necessity and how we deal with the CALLERLAB membership. You promised not to hold my feet to the fire. I'll say within a month, because we had requested this information. I had requested some 3,000 copies of both the decals and the license cards, requested copies of that as soon as possible. They are at the printers, but I don't have them at this time.
John, can I follow up on this?
No.
Two questions. One is that some of us callers are from the backwoods, and our big dance is 2 squares or 3 squares. What happens if we use square dance labels and just round dance labels? The second question is, since we are from the backwoods and some of us never get mail, and we make less than some of the big name callers, what happens to the non-members and the clubs that really don't make any money at all, and they're out there or nowhere, and they're going to fold if this happens?
To answer your first question, if you use square and round dance labels, that has nothing to do whether the tune itself has been copyrighted or not. Let me give you a case in point. Some of you may have the record My Hero on Silver Sounds. Maybe BMI and ASCAP don't recognize it under that name. They recognize it under the name Wind Beneath My Wings. That is a copyright tune. The fact that it was put out on a square dance label has nothing to do with whether it's copyrighted or not. That is no assurance to you, and you can't make book on that. Most of the round dance records, unfortunately, are written to pop tunes. They may be re-recorded on a square dance label or a round dance label, but they are still copyrighted music under a pop tune. They are not covered. They would have to be licensable. The second question is, BMI and ASCAP really don't care if you're making money or not. We care. We are trying to protect our members and the clubs of the square dance activity, and that's why we negotiated a contract which we feel is a reasonable rate.
Dave Taylor, Florida. I don't have a question, John. I did want to make a statement because, like so many people here, I've had tons of phone calls asking for information from me personally. I'm sure you have had too. And I'm sure there's some people out there still silent that don't agree with all this. The only thing I wanted to say that some of you could pass on, and some of you are here, what I've heard over the last few months is, I don't like what I hear. That's what I've heard. I don't like what I'm hearing. There's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean it's illegal. And I'm hearing people say, I don't believe in it, I don't like it, therefore I'm not going along with it, and there's going to be no problem, they can't sue me. And I think you should pass on, from you people are now more informed than I ever was when I got here, there's a difference between I don't like it and I don't have to do it. You can't get away with it.
The question or statement was made yesterday, and I think it's perhaps a good analogy. How many of you like the federal income tax we have to pay to the IRS? Try not paying that. It is a requirement. What we have done is try to lessen the financial burden on each and every one of us and to protect the clubs in so doing, so that the burden becomes less of a burden.
Randy Doherty from Mesa, Arizona. I work in a facility that is already a member of BMI and ASCAP. Can I deduct that from the number of sessions I do within a year? And the other question I have is, did CALLERLAB put out a mailing to people other than callers? Because I have a lot of letters from square dance clubs, and I'm wondering where the fire got started at, asking if I'm licensed.
Okay, answer both of your questions. If you are calling in a facility which has a facilities permit and is licensed, any dances called in that facility should not count against the total number that you call each year. The second question you asked is, did we put out a mailing to other than square dance callers? And the answer is yes, to the publications, and the publications have indeed given it widespread coverage, and in that we recommended that they use licensed callers and cuers. Unfortunately, some of them said, are you a CALLERLAB member? In other words, they took a liberty with that and misstated what we had put out. We are very careful to use the term licensed callers and cuers. We encourage clubs, if their caller and cuer do not belong to CALLERLAB and RoundaLab, that perhaps they would like to encourage their callers and cuers to join those organizations. But in any case, as long as they use licensed callers and cuers, regardless of what that source of licensing is, they would be protected from the sponsor's obligation to have a license. Yes?
I'm wondering how much money was spent on doing that, and why we did that before the whole thing was really settled.
All right, the answer to the question, first off, the question was, why did we do that and how much money was spent? Beg pardon? Hold it. Dick, I'm sorry. That's getting a little bit long. Let me answer the question. The question was, why did we send this out and how much did it cost? CALLERLAB sends out press releases to publications periodically throughout the year. We notify them of quarterly selections. We notify them of the contra of the quarter, the round dance of the quarter, and a few other things of that nature. This was piggybacked with one of those mailings to alert them as to the club responsibility and to what the action taken by CALLERLAB and RoundaLab as professional organizations, the professional leadership of the square and round dance community, in such a way that we could give them the way of protecting themselves from lawsuit from BMI and ASCAP.
Also, to that end, remember, it was not only callers who were calling the CALLERLAB office. Tremendous numbers of clubs Festival leaders, directors, committee groups were calling constantly, what should we do? One of the first things that we got BMI to agree to was to tell these people not to respond or do anything during negotiations, not to panic, not to go crazy, that we were working on it. And that's one of the things we did early on, to try to calm everybody because there was such a panic reaction. It was constant, and there was a lot of it from the dance community because a great men, you may shake your head, sir, I was in the office, I know what happened. Let's go on.
Mike Jacobs, Chantilly, Virginia. A comment and a question. First off, the gentleman with the video reproduction and maybe dancing that might find that it'll fall under the guise of AFTRA, since it's a visual reproduction as opposed to an audio. So that might have to investigate it that way. Secondly, the question is, has any thought been given to going to BMI to conduct a mass mailing to the people they initially contacted in order to notify them of all this information, since they're the ones that stirred up the hornet's nest in the first place? And secondly, there may be groups out there that will continue to use non-CALLERLAB members that are not licensed, and therefore the producer's fee will fall upon them.
We thank you for the response to the first one about AFTRA. The answer to the second question is yes. No, we have indeed addressed that question, and we are trying to get them to send out a press release, if you will. We will give them a copy of what we're sending out and ask that they cover all the people to whom they sent the initial mailing, because we do not have that record, nor do we wish to pick up that record. But thank you.
Kevin Brown from Germany. My question is, I know if an artist records a piece of music and sometime down the road another artist re-records it, he gets a separate copyright. Have our record companies looked into doing the same thing, and then maybe applying some of the royalties to come back into our activity?
That's the end of your question? Easy to answer. If the person who does the re-recording indeed is a member of BMI or ASCAP and chooses to copyright it under one of those organizations, then they would be eligible for the royalties based upon the formula that they have used as to how those fees are paid. Some people have asked the question, how do they get their money? How do we know what's happening to this money we pay BMI and ASCAP? The answer is they have a very complex formula that they use for the country and western stations, the bulk of which our music falls onto, and they take that based upon the air recordings that have been made throughout the country. They then divvy that up among the artists of the tunes which have been used, and they pay the applicable portion to those artists as a means of reimbursement. What would happen there, maybe some of the tunes which we use won't go directly to that artist because they weren't played on the radio, but that's the way the formula works, and that really, to be honest with you, we don't really care. We're buying the insurance to protect us and to protect the clubs.
Thank you, John. I'm Vanya Layton from Lower Lake, California, and that was my question. Where did the money go?
Sit down.
Hi, John. Hal Perry from San Marcos, Texas. The first one's real quick. That came up earlier. He said someone joins in the middle of the year. Someone joins in the middle of the year. Are their fees the same?
The answer to the question is yes. Their fees are the same. They will not prorate the fees by ASCAP. BMI has verbally agreed to prorate the fees after 6 months. In other words, if they joined after the 1st of October, the rates would be half of what the BMI fees are, and that would be the license fee that you would buy by joining CALLERLAB after the 1st of October. We prorate our dues, they would prorate their fees. ASCAP will not. ASCAP will keep the same fees.
That was not my original question. And the original question, and more important question, is, can you play the trombone? No. I am very much interested in new callers and their training and allowing them mic time, and I've heard various rumors. How is it handled?
If a caller is licensed to call a dance and he allows a new caller, an amateur night if you will, someone to call a tip or even a half a tip, That is not requiring a separate license. At a caller school, those are considered workshops, and as long as the callers who are conducting the training are letting the callers practice time, that is considered part of the workshop, does not require a separate license. When that new caller, that apprentice, that trainee, whatever you would like to call them, when that person goes out to call a dance on his or her own, they indeed must be licensed, but not single tips. No, but Dave Taylor has created a monster with his trying to be a comedian.
Many clubs have what they call amateur night, where every caller on the program that night is an amateur. Sometimes if they have only 4 callers, then each caller has to call twice in order to give the dancers a full dance. Those dances, it would be well if the club hired one licensed caller to MC the amateur night. Then no matter how many tips the amateur callers have to call just to get through an 8-tip evening, they would still be covered.
Bob Silva, Massachusetts. I need a little more clarification on the caller-cure couples. And the thing is this, just my question is, when I get my mailing from CALLERLAB, it's addressed to Bob Silva. When I get my mailing from Roundalab, it's Norma and Bob Silva. We are a unit, or a teaching unit. If I pay my fee to CALLERLAB, my wife is not licensed, technically. So if she goes out to Q, she needs to be licensed if I'm not calling that dance. If I got my license through Roundalab, I am licensed, I would assume, because of teaching unit. No? Okay.
Roundalab licenses the round dance couples. CALLERLAB licenses the caller, but where the caller and the partner call and cue together, both indeed are covered. If you call one place and Norma calls some other place, both of you must be licensed. Now, the way that works is that, let's say for sake of discussion, that many times you and Norma call and cue together. Your total number of dances, will say, just for sake of discussion, is 150 or less. You would pay the $75 fee. If she calls fewer than 100 dances on her own, she would pay the $52.50 rate for her license for those occasions when she calls other than with you. She would not have to pay separate CALLERLAB dues. And that's the agreement we have with Roundalab and BMI-Ascap.
Peg Tyrrell from Roundalab. I just want to thank CALLERLAB for the work that the two groups have been doing. It has been great to work together with John. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg.
John Wilkes, Bullhead City, Arizona. Did I understand that schools, community colleges and such, are covered under BMI and ASCAP for the programs that they have with square dancing?
You're talking about adult education type of things? They may or may not be. But if you as the caller are being paid for those services, you do not meet the requirements of the exemption under the 6 categories that George read under one statute and the 5 categories under which he wrote in the other. The schools as such, if they use music as a part of their curriculum, are exempt because they meet all 6 of those requirements. But square dance activity does not apply if you as the caller are receiving financial consideration for your calling.
Mark Marcellus from Thornton, Ontario, Canada. My question is this: what is the CALLERLAB Board of Governors prepared to do for members outside of the USA if and when the associations of BMI and ASCAP in their country are acquainted with what is going on in the USA?
We have an agreement with BMI and ASCAP that they will not try to induce other organizations outside of the U.S. borders to pursue the square dance activity. Whether or not they abide by that, I cannot say, Mac. If and when the Canadian counterparts of BMI and ASCAP do indeed raise their heads. Damn. If they raise the issue, we will address it at that point, and I assume that we will be able to negotiate something on behalf of our Canadian members. The way we now have it with the Canadian and overseas callers who call infrequently in the U.S., we allow them to purchase the apprentice rate, if you will, the 5250 rate for those occasions when they call below the U.S.-Canadian border.
Proprietary use of our mailing list we put in.
Oh, another provision in the contract, which I think you will be pleased to hear, we must indeed provide a list of the people who are licensed. However, there are many ways to produce a list. One, we could produce it in a mailing label sequence, which they then could use a scanner and put it into their system. We don't intend to do that. We're going to do it in a single line of uneven nature, not justified right or left, so it becomes difficult for them to do that. We also have in the agreement that it is not only confidential, our mailing list, our list of licensees, but it is proprietary in nature. That means in contractual terminology that they are prevented from selling that list to anyone outside of their own organization.
For those who have asked why you haven't had all of this information in the mail, you may now begin to get a feeling of what we would have had to have tried to put in print. You're just beginning to sense that, and we haven't hit it all yet. And one other thing I would offer to you, please understand that your Board of Governors and your Executive Committee themselves may not be real thrilled about the fact that this whole thing raised its ugly head. All we tried to do was deal with it. You know, there's a lot of us that are not real thrilled about this either, but we think we're taking the approach the best way we can to handle the protection. Okay?
Ernie, if you'll just be patient with us and try not to get too excited, we have to make a very quick decision.
What about the comments you just made about how we're going to give them the way we're going to design that list?
Okay, the decision has been made. You'll be happy to know we have some immediate online decisions. This session was taped by Steve Davidson and crew of the Convention Tapes International. We told him we would not allow that distribution until we gave him a reading. If this was going to be just an open complaint session, we probably would not have released it. We feel that your behavior, your questions, your comments have been well-intentioned. We have no objection to this being used by you, by your associations, as a means of providing upfront, straightforward answers. These tapes will be for sale. They do not appear on your blue sheet because we did not know, and the decision has been made by Chairman Ernie Kinney and John Marshall and the Executive Committee that this will be offered for sale through Convention Tapes International. We regret that we did not have time to address the rest of the questions. However, if you would like to stick around, you're on the coffee break, but that's up to you.
I'm Dottie Swinson from Portland, Oregon. There are many square dance associations that are affiliated.
Hey, gang, we don't object if you leave for the coffee break, but please don't start talking till you're outside, in fairness to those who wish to stay and continue to hear the questions.
There are many associations that are affiliated with CALLERLAB, and I'm concerned about the callers that belong to those that are in limbo, whether to join CALLERLAB or not. And I'm wondering if there could be a fee that would be higher than what CALLERLAB members are paying, but not as high as the $15 per dance.
The answer to your question is this was discussed by the Executive Committee, and a conscious decision was made not to offer the license to anyone who did not join CALLERLAB in the capacity of apprentice subscriber or member. We realize that we allow that for the insurance, but we did not feel we should offer that for the license agreement. We also, Dottie, to answer further on that question, we do not have the right to negotiate for associations of callers. We only can negotiate for the callers who choose to join our organization, and that's part of the reason for that decision. It may seem unfair and inconsistent, but that's the logic that you have to use when you're dealing with this sort of thing. We can't negotiate for someone who doesn't belong.
I'm Mike Missio from Chalmette, Louisiana, right outside New Orleans, and I'm an apprentice. And I just wanted to get clarified that these charges, will that be able to be passed on to the club? And if so, how, are y'all going to make a suggested price?
The answer is a caller is free to negotiate fees in any way he or she so desires. My personal judgment, if a caller asks for more than $1 or $2 increased fees for a dance, he is overcharging. That's his total cost. Why should he charge the clubs and gals the clubs? There are some callers out there who are insisting that their fees be increased by $5 or $25. I say hogwash. Get somebody else. There's lots of callers out there.
Aunt Anthony, Rumford, Rhode Island. I understand that my wife is covered as a cure when I'm calling the dance. But if she's calling for another licensed caller, where I'm not the primary caller, but I'm physically there doing a guest tip, she would be covered.
The answer to the question is, as long as you are present, you are covered as a calling queuing team. If you are not the caller, but you are physically there, you are both covered.
Jerry Porter, Massachusetts. Three things. One, I would like to see on the chart, if possible, what it would cost for you to join if you were independent of CALLERLAB. In other words, what are the independent BMI-Ascap figures? Two, I heard somewhere that it's not advisable for advertising purposes to use the word festival or convention in your advertisement. It just draws attention to you. Okay. And third, you just said that this tape was for sale. Is it included in the package that some of us have already purchased?
The answer is no, it was not on the schedule, therefore it's not included in the package. The answer to your first question, the individual fees for BMI are $91. If you go not over 60 students per week, 60 students total per week. BMI is 91, ASCAP is 86. And your second question was?
Should you use festival or convention?
The festival. The reason we suggested you not use that, to them that says 20,000 or more dancers. It is not illegal to use that. If you want to call it the Upper Slovovia Festival conducted on the 14th weekend of January, I don't care. But that's, we just suggest that you not use that because you alert them if they see the term festival. They see big bucks.
Hi again.
Hi, Vanya Layton from Lower Lake, California. And I'm not clear on what these tape services have to do. They're just recording a little bit of piece of music, sending it out, and then selling the records. How does this cover on that?
I do not intend to speak for commercial enterprises as to how they handle that and whether it's legal or not. I don't know. I think since that is not a performance and that is probably an advertisement, they have some provision to cover it, but I cannot speak for their business practices.
Larry Cole, Indiana. I have one bit of confusion at home, John, that I've had a hard time getting straightened out, and I talked to you about it, and that is a standard club dance that has a caller and a non-married cuer hired do not both have to be licensed in their own right. And then I have a comment. I think we owe a great deal of gratitude to the professional leadership that we have had that have handled this situation so fine.
To respond to your comment first, we thank you. Secondarily, there is some school of thought that as long as the caller is licensed, the cure may not have to be licensed. However, it is probably advisable that the cure should be licensed. If you'll accept that response, we are not passing a legal opinion, but making a recommendation that each should be.
Chuck Hansen, Yuma, Arizona. I have a question on if I am a sponsoring caller and have a license, have a hall, do I have to, and I hire a band for a live dance music, they have to have a separate license, is that correct? Or can they fall under my license?
If we're talking about the infrequent occasion of live music, that is covered under the terms of our agreement with BMI and ASCAP.
Rick Evans, Manhattan, Kansas. We currently have
a state convention that clearly is not covered, and I understand that. That is all the callers and cuers and all the dancers from across the state conceivably. There are also going on during the year, and I'm sure in many states, a Northeast Callers Festival, a North Central Callers Festival is the terminology that's been applied, a Northeast Tenderfoot Dance, etc., that is co-sponsored perhaps by 1/6 of the state is what it amounts to, the northeast section of the state, that caller association, with or without the dancers as a co-sponsor. Are those type of quote-unquote festivals covered, or are those also under the umbrella of the state convention, which is not covered?
To answer your question, if the callers and cuers who call at a regional dance, a parade of callers, if you will, if they are all licensed, then it is covered. If you do not use entirely licensed callers, you as the sponsoring agency would be at risk.
Joel Cage, Fremont, California. I had two questions. One is, in the event that I'm unable to be at a dance and I have to hire a fill-in caller, who is actually responsible if he turns out not to be licensed? The second question is, on contracts, when they hire for a party night in advance, is there a particular terminology that we're recommending to verify that the individual is indeed a licensed caller?
Okay, the question is twofold. Number one, who is responsible if you have a license but are unable to be there and you wish to hire an unlicensed caller? It is the sponsoring person or club who is responsible for the license. If it is your club run and you hire a non-licensed caller, you would be the one at jeopardy. The second part of your question was on the contracts. If you take a look at the contract which is out front, you'll see their section of there under special considerations. It says licensed to use BMI-Ascap music, yes or no. That is the terminology we recommend. We have modified our contracts or confirmation agreements. They are available for sale for anyone who wants them.
Skip him, go to the next guy. He's had a turn.
You had a turn.
Jerry Justin. My question is to do with clogging and round dancing and calling. My wife and I teach rounds. I call square dances, and my wife teaches clogging. We work in the RV parks in the wintertime. To get insurance for the, like I have for CALLERLAB and RoundaLab, I had to have my wife join as an associate member, and I do pay that extra fee every year in CALLERLAB so that I have that insurance. Now my question is, how many licenses do we have to have?
BMI and ASCAP will not cover clogging. There is an outfit, Ron Hogue is the administrator of that outfit. It is in Houston. I don't have the address memorized or the telephone number, but if you call the Pocono Pines office or if you call George's office after the 1st of April, we will give you that address and the number from which you can join through the clogging network, which has similar license structures for the clogging. They will not cross-licensing square dance with clogging. That is their response. We tried. I think that's probably a gray area, but I cannot tell you that you would be covered. You might be at risk. You want to stand in line, sir? No. I yield to the tall Texan from Arlington. No, that's not what he said. He said he pays her insurance as a separate entity so that she is covered when she queues. And the answer is yes, we do provide that insurance for her.
Do they then only have to have one license to cover that as well?
If she is hired under her own right, calling at a different location than Jerry, she would have to have a separate license on that basis. Only one membership. You only have one membership, or did she join as an apprentice to CALLERLAB for what? No, associate is for people who have been calling and are retired from active calling but who have attended at least 3 conventions.
How is she covered under the insurance then?
He bought separate insurance from her. The insurance is covered. Okay? That's a separate thing. $30.
Jack Elmore, San Diego, California. Just a moment ago you mentioned the regional festivals and so on, and you mentioned if all the callers were licensed. Can I assume that if they are in fact not all the callers and queuers on the program are licensed, that the event sponsor would be at risk?
That is correct. Listen, I realize a lot of you have other meetings to go to. So does John, so does George, so do I. We would like to thank all of you for coming. We do appreciate your gentleness. We do not feel bloodied. We truly believe that we have negotiated an excellent contract. We hope that you feel the same way.
Thank you, folks.